Dr. Phil, back with my cohort here, Coach Mike. This is part 3 of a series we've been doing on suicide, and we're doing it because there's just been a lot of it in the media lately, sadly. People have asked me a lot. I've seen it on Twitter, Facebook, everywhere that you guys reach out to me. The question has been, Dr. Phil, is there more suicide going on right now, or are we just hearing about it more because of these 30-minute news cycles where everything hits the news just 24 hours a day? And in part 1, we pointed out the fact that sadly it is on the increase. In fact, it's increased 25% since 1999. And a 25% increase in anything across that short a period of time, just epidemiologically, is a big increase. So that's problematic. Why? I mean, is our world getting more fast-paced? Are stresses building up? Are people less equipped to deal with the challenges of life? That's a philosophical question for another day. But in section 1, we talked about suicide and really what led up to it. I mean, was it in fact on the increase? In part 2, we talked about what were the warning signs. Does it come out of the blue, or can you actually see this coming? And the answer was yes. And we very specifically identified what the warning signs were. And then we promised that in section 3, we were going to give you a tool belt. We were going to give you some coping skills, a behavioral arsenal of what to do if you sense some of these warning signs in someone else, or frankly, if you recognize them in yourself. Because there are things to do if you recognize this in someone, right?
There are things to do. The other few things we covered too was 54% of people who have committed suicide were never diagnosed and had no clear diagnosis.
Wasn't that disturbing?
Oh.
I mean, 90%, we pointed out 90% of people had a mental illness at the time they committed suicide, and over half of them had never sought help, which meant they had gone untreated or gotten into an acute situation that they didn't have help for. So their coping skills were just overwhelmed.
And I think that's why in this part 3, we're really trying to help, if it's you watching this or a loved one that you have, that we can give you some new tools so that you don't have to be a part of the statistics, and that we can do our part in best providing some information. So we provide some help.
Here's the thing, if you're seeing these warning signs, don't be afraid that you're going to suggest someone into killing themselves. That's not going to happen. So let's be very specific about what to do if you see these warning signs. Number 1, talk about it. If you're concerned that somebody is suicidal, ask direct, specific questions, right? Just straight up ask them, I'm concerned about what I'm seeing and hearing. Are you thinking about ending your life? Are you considering suicide? Straight up ask them the question. Don't mamby-pamby around about it. Ask them the question. You've done this a million times, right?
I have. I also think once you ask the question is to know if it's, like, for example, I'm a life coach, so I'm not going to put anyone on a psychiatric hold, and to some degree it's out of my scope of practice. Right. To believe that certain diagnoses are my expertise, but to make sure that you're also not playing the part of doctor when really you're a friend.
Right.
So it's really important that you provide the right resources and know your own bandwidth of what you could help with and what you can.
Right, which means you want to have a plan. You want to have a resource at fingertip. If you've seen someone that you're concerned about, then have the number for the suicide hotline at hand. Have a number for a counselor at your church or the community health center. Have it in your pocket. Mm-hmm. Have somebody say, look, here's a number. Call this number. Promise me that you will. Mm-hmm. Make eye contact with them and say, make me a promise you won't do something until you talk to this person or you talk to me again. I mean, be an accountability source. But ask the specific question. Don't ask it with bias. Don't ask it with judgment. And do not trivialize. Don't say, look, it's not a big deal. But if you're kind of thinking about it, everybody thinks, no, don't make it like it's no big deal. It is a big deal. Let them know if they're thinking about it, it is a big deal. You are concerned about it and you want to talk about it. And when you ask that question and you do it without judgment, I promise you that person just may be sitting there wondering if anybody knows and if anybody really cares. But when you ask that question, be prepared to listen. Now, you may not be a doctor, you may not be a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a social worker, you may not be a psychiatric nurse, you may not be somebody that's specifically trained in this area, but you're a human being. You have a heart and you have a mind and you can listen. So don't ask this if you're not prepared to sit down on a bench or go sit in your car walking out of the grocery store or wherever and actually listen to what the person has to say when you ask the question. Because being a compassionate ear and hearing what they have to say can make the difference between life and death.
It can, and also not keeping secrets. You know, if you have a friend and you're very concerned about them, call their parents if you believe their parent's going to be a healthy person to have that conversation. Don't go at it alone. Don't hold on to people's secrets, because ultimately you're carrying the secret. And if you're not skilled or prepared to deal with it and you don't have a plan in place like you've described, you're just holding on to a very dangerous situation.
Well, I'm so glad you said that, because you guys have probably heard me say on Dr. Phil, you've probably heard me say and wondered what I meant by it, so I'll take this opportunity to explain it. You've heard me say, I'm expendable here. When I'm talking to a family member or whatever, and I say, I'm expendable, what I mean is, it's not important that they like me. It's not important that they love me. It's not important that we have a long-term relationship. I'm expendable. They can get mad at me. They can decide I'm the worst son of a bitch in the world. That's okay as long as I'm a change agent. And what Mike is saying here, what Coach Mike is saying is, if you feel like you're violating a secret and it saves their life, but it costs you a friend, you're expendable. Go make another friend. If you have to violate what they consider a confidence in order to get them help and save their life, then that's a price you need to be prepared to pay. Remember, we said 90% of people that commit suicide are suffering an active mental illness at the time, and half of them have not gotten any help at all. You can be the change agent that breaks that pact and causes them to get in front of a caregiver, a skilled caregiver, and get help. So, do you get rejected? Do you get criticized? You can handle it. You're not suicidal, they are. So you need to ask the questions pointedly, specifically, look them in the eye, be prepared to listen, and have an action plan in place. By action plan, it just means a resource, a hotline. Be prepared to call family members. Do whatever is necessary to get them help so they aren't left alone, because they truly aren't alone. They have you, and that's really important. We'll see you next time, and look at the bottom of this, because we're going to have every resource, number, website that you can use to hand to a friend, or let's be honest, maybe you need it for yourself.